In ancient Greece, there was a man so calm that being near him made other people uneasy. Not because he spoke loudly, not because he held power, not because he tried to dominate anyone, but because nothing seemed able to disturb him. And when someone reaches that kind of stillness, people notice immediately. Because most human beings are used to pressure working. They are used to fear getting inside you. They are used to tension changing your face. They are used to your emotions being easy to touch. But this man was different. Even Alexander the Great, the man who crushed nations, is said to have gone out of his way to be around him, not to learn battle tactics, not to hear a speech, not to be inspired. Simply to experience what it felt like to stand near a man who seemed beyond fear. That is how rare this was. And if you have ever walked into a room and felt judged, intimidated, dismissed, or psychologically cornered, then what this man discovered matters to you. Because he found a method that can make your calm feel almost unnatural to other people. In this video, I'll show you who he was, what he practiced, and how to use it so you become far harder to pressure, shame, or rattle. His name was Pyrrho. He was born around 360 BC in Elis, in ancient Greece, and unlike the legends people usually remember, he did not begin as a conqueror, a ruler, or some celebrated genius. He was ordinary. By most accounts, he started as a painter. No title, no prestige, no obvious power, no reason anyone should still be saying his name more than 2,000 years later. Then his life took a turn. At around 30, he joined the campaigns of Alexander the Great. And this is what makes him different from the philosophers people casually quote online. Pyrrho did not form his ideas in comfort. He did not describe peace from a safe corner of the world. He did not study fear from a distance. He walked into disorder, war, fatigue, violence, loss, uncertainty, the kind of uncertainty that strips performance away and reveals what a man really is. And somewhere inside that world, Pyrrho became known for something almost impossible. He stayed composed. Not staged composure, not polite social restraint, not the kind of calm a person fakes while panic tears through him underneath. Actual stillness. The kind that makes everyone around it more aware of their own instability. When he returned to Greece, people were drawn to him for that reason. He had no throne, no army of his own, no rank that should have made him intimidating. And yet his presence carried force. Because there is something deeply unsettling about a person who cannot be hooked by fear. Pyrrho understood something ruthless. Most people are not controlled by others directly. They are controlled by what they cannot stop wanting from others. That is where anxiety begins. The moment you enter a room needing approval, your position weakens. The moment you need to impress, you become transparent. The moment you are desperate not to look foolish, you become fragile. The moment your peace depends on a certain outcome, it no longer belongs to you. And people sense this faster than you think. They notice when you want validation. They notice when you are scared of losing face. They notice when your confidence hangs on their reaction. They notice when you are silently asking to be accepted. And once that becomes visible, the balance changes. Now you can be pushed. Now you can be rushed. Now you can be made to explain too much, apologize too fast, and shrink without meaning to. This is why so many people break in social situations. Not because the moment is unbearable, because they entered it already attached. Attached to being admired, attached to winning, attached to not feeling embarrassed, attached to preserving an image. Pyrrho saw the answer with brutal clarity. The room only controls the person who depends on it. The room only controls the person who depends on it. That is why one person trembles while another remains still. One is psychologically tied to the outcome. The other has already loosened that grip. This is the part most people get wrong. They think calm is something you are born with. It is not. It is trained. Most reactions are not fate. They are habits. Patterns repeated so many times that they start to feel like personality. The fast apology, the defensive explanation, the tightening in your face, the urge to fill silence, the instinct to panic the second pressure appears. Most people call that just how I am. Pyrrho would say, no. That is conditioning. And anything conditioned can be retrained. The Greeks had a word for the state he aimed at. Ataraxia. Deep inner steadiness. Not hype. Not confidence theater. Not smiling while your nerves are screaming. Not forcing yourself to look composed. Something much deeper. A state where praise, rejection, status, approval, and results no longer dictate your inner condition. And this is where most people misunderstand calmness. They think the goal is to manage your reaction after fear arrives. Pyrrho went further than that. He was not teaching emotional suppression. He was teaching a way of seeing things that weakens fear before it fully forms. He was also teaching discipline over impulse. The ability to slow the moment down, to create space, to choose your response instead of being dragged by your first reaction. That kind of control does not appear by accident. It is built. That is why his presence felt unusual. Most people try to appear composed while inwardly begging life to go their way. Pyrrho was no longer begging. That is what made him hard to move. He carried himself like someone who had already stopped negotiating with discomfort. And that kind of calm does not look normal to ordinary people. Here is the method. It sounds almost too simple. That is exactly why so many people overlook how powerful it is. Before any situation that makes you tense, ask yourself, what is the worst that actually happens here? Not the dramatic movie in your head, not the vague dread, not the fantasy your anxious mind keeps feeding. The real outcome. If you speak and they judge you, what happens? If you try and get turned down, what happens? If you fail in front of people, what happens? If someone disrespects you, what happens? If they misunderstand you, laugh at you, or think less of you, what happens? Then ask the second question. Can I live through that? That is the method. Can I live through rejection? Can I live through embarrassment? Can I live through a bruised ego? Can I live through being wrong? Can I live through hearing no? Can I recover if things go badly? For most of the fears that dominate everyday life, the answer is yes. And once that becomes real to you, fear begins to lose its inflation. Because fear feeds on unfinished narratives. Fear does not control you by pain. It controls you by prediction. It expands when your mind never follows the thought to the end. It grows in fog. It grows in vagueness. It grows in that endless loop of what if, without ever demanding a conclusion. Pyrrho's method breaks the loop. What if they reject me? Then what? What if I look weak? Then what? What if I fail? Then what? What if they think less of me? Then what? What if I humiliate myself? Then what? Keep tracing fear until it reaches its true ending. Most of the time, the ending is not destruction, it is discomfort. It is wounded pride. It is an image of yourself taking a hit. And once you see that clearly, the spell weakens. That is why this works. It takes fear out of imagination and places it in reality. And reality is usually far smaller than panic makes it look. And once you do that, you can slow the moment down. You stop reacting automatically. You stop obeying old patterns. You start choosing. That is where calm begins to look visible. Now, a fair question is this. What about a battlefield? What about real danger? What about a situation where the worst outcome is not embarrassment, but death? That matters. Because this method is not saying every fear is imaginary. Some threats are real. A spear is real. A blade is real. Death is real. Pyrrho's insight was not that danger does not exist. It was that panic makes you less useful in the presence of danger. In ordinary life, this method frees you from social fear. In extreme situations, it does something else. It gives you clarity. Not passivity, not numbness, clarity. The mind that stops multiplying horror can act. The mind that stops dramatizing can see. The man who is not mentally collapsing is harder to break, even when the situation is serious. So no, this is not a denial of danger. It is the refusal to die 1,000 times in your head before reality has even touched you. Now here's the part that makes this so effective. When you are no longer terrified of social pain, people can feel it. And that changes the atmosphere immediately. Why? Because so much of human interaction runs on invisible force. Most people are not afraid of pressure. They are afraid of what pressure will reveal about them. Who needs approval more? Who is afraid of humiliation? Who is trying to keep everyone comfortable? Who is desperate not to be disliked? Who is reacting too fast? Who is surrendering authority to the room? Most people are easy to move because they carry hidden dependency. Dependency on validation, dependency on respect, dependency on appearing strong, dependency on being chosen, dependency on avoiding discomfort at all costs. But the person who has already accepted the worst realistic outcome operates differently. You cannot easily shame someone who has made peace with embarrassment. You cannot easily threaten someone who has already accepted discomfort. You cannot easily manipulate someone whose inner state is not waiting for your approval. And people recognize that instantly. They sense that you are not reaching for them, not performing for them, not asking them silently to confirm your worth. That kind of quiet is rare. And because it is rare, it feels powerful, a little strange, almost abnormal. This is why truly grounded people can make others nervous. Not because they are trying to intimidate anyone. Because pressure no longer lands where it usually lands. I understood this when I was 17. It was my first sales job. I was young, inexperienced, and hungry to prove myself. And like most young men, I cared far too much about how I appeared in front of other people. Then I made a mistake. I sent the wrong items to a client. My boss found out and called me out in the middle of the office. Not privately, not somewhere hidden, right there on the floor, where everyone could hear him. and the room felt it. People stopped pretending to work. You could feel attention shifting. You could feel that silent anticipation people have when they think they are about to watch someone fold. Then he started shouting. Careless, unprofessional, costing him money, making me feel like I had just exposed weakness in front of the entire room. And that was the point. He wanted me to crack. He wanted panic. He wanted the stammer. He wanted the over-apology. He wanted my eyes to drop. He wanted that visible collapse people have when social pressure gets inside them. For a moment, I felt that reaction starting to rise. Then one thought cut through all of it. What is the worst that actually happens here? He fires me. Fine. Then what? I find another job. That's it. That was the catastrophe my mind had expanded into something unbearable. And once I saw it clearly, he lost most of his leverage. That tiny space changed everything, the space between impulse and response. So I looked at him and said calmly, I understand. I'll fix it today. That was all. No pleading, no emotional spill, no frantic explanation, no effort to mirror his intensity. And the room went silent. Because he had thrown his force at me and found nowhere for it to land. He expected fear. He met composure. He expected me to break shape. I stayed exactly where I was. And when someone cannot move you the way they expected, they are often the one who becomes uncomfortable. He walked away faster than I thought he would, and after that day, nobody in that office tried to make me feel small again. That is ataraxia. Not trying to stay calm while the pressure is already crushing you. Becoming inwardly settled before the moment arrives because you have already accepted the possible ending. So here is how you use it. Before the interview, before the meeting, before the confrontation, before the difficult conversation, before approaching the person you are afraid to approach, before speaking when you usually stay quiet, before any moment that usually tightens your body and narrows your breathing. Pause. Slow it down. And ask, what is the worst that actually happens here? Make it specific. Remove the drama. Name the consequence precisely. Then ask, can I live through that? Not, can I enjoy it? Not, can I avoid every sting? Can I endure it and continue? Can I endure rejection? Can I endure awkwardness? Can I endure being judged? Can I endure not being chosen? Can I endure a dent to my pride? Can I keep going if this does not go my way? If the answer is yes, stop handing your peace to the possibility. Accept it. Accept the discomfort. Accept the awkward silence. Accept the possibility of being misunderstood. Accept that some people will not admire you. Accept that outcomes do not always cooperate with your ego. And then enter the room free. Now your speech changes. Now your pacing changes. Now your face changes. Now you stop over-explaining. Now you stop chasing permission. Now you stop asking the room to tell you who you are. That is what people notice. Not just your words. The absence of inner desperation. This is the Greek method. Not fake confidence, not motivational theater, not pretending to be fearless. Something far more serious. It is making peace with consequences. Because once you have made peace with the worst realistic outcome, one of the world's favorite weapons loses its grip on you. Fear. That is what Pyrrho understood. Calm is not a gift. It is a discipline. The person who can withstand embarrassment cannot be easily shamed. The person who can withstand rejection cannot be easily manipulated. The person who can withstand failure cannot be easily intimidated. The person who no longer needs anything from the room becomes the hardest person in that room to control. And that is why this kind of calm looks almost insane to ordinary people. Because ordinary people are constantly reacting, constantly adjusting themselves, constantly defending an image, constantly trying not to lose status. But the person who has already accepted the ending carries a different presence. He does not chase. He does not flinch. He does not contort himself every time pressure appears. And people feel that. They may never hear the word Ataraxia. They may never know who Pyrrho was, but they will recognize the effect. They will feel that there is something unnaturally steady about you. Something quiet, something heavy, something difficult to move, something that does not panic when heat enters the room. And in a world where most people are ruled by unexamined fear, that does not look normal. The moment you no longer need the room loses its grip on you. Because the room only controls the person who depends on it. Need nothing. And watch how the entire dynamic changes. If this spoke to you, subscribe. And if you want more words that sharpen your mind and steady your presence, stay here. Because the right sentence can change the way a man walks into a room. And this one can stay with you longer than you think.